Hi, I'm Mike Bellevue, and today I'm back at Duelist Den, and I've got something I've been working on for a while. Today we're going to be shooting Pedersoli's Model 1859 Sharps Infantry Rifle. As I said, this is made by Pedersoli in Italy. This particular one was imported by Dixie Gun Works, and it's had some fairly extensive modifications done by Larry Flees. And I'm going to tell you all about it, and then we'll function test it. Well, the purpose of today's video is really to introduce you to the Model 1859 Sharps rifle and to function test it. And primarily what I'm interested in there is whether or not I've got the length of the cartridges correct. So we're not going to be trying for accuracy, and in fact I know the sights are going to be off because I had Larry Flees put on a much higher front sight. So once I've got my load worked up, I can file that down and get the proper 50-yard sight picture. Because the whole idea with this is to sight it in at 50 yards and then use the ladder sights out at 100, 200, 300 yards if I should ever be foolish enough to shoot that far. So let's take a look at this gun and go through some of the features of it. Well, the Sharps rifle is a lever-activated falling block rifle, and what that means is pretty simple. It means that the action is activated by pulling down on this lever. That lever raises and lowers this breech block. When the breech block is lowered, it exposes a chamber, and the gun is loaded from the rear just like a conventional cartridge single-shot rifle. It's actually a very neat design. Now, this design was the brainchild of a fellow named Christian Sharps, who was from New Jersey, and he cooked this thing up and patented it in 1848. And Sharps was an interesting guy. He worked for 13 years as an apprentice and then as a gunsmith at the Harper's Ferry Arsenal. And he worked under Captain Hall, the inventor of the Hall breech-loading rifle, which is kind of an interesting design that was adopted by the U.S. Army for a while. And Hall rifles had a problem. They had a real problem with gas leakage. And Sharps worked on those, and he got some ideas, and that's how he came up with this falling breech rifle. Now, he went into operation in 1850, but the original rifles that were designed by Christian Sharps did not look exactly like this. They had a slanted breech block, and they slanted to the rear slightly. The action was exactly the same, but they made those slant breech rifles, as they're called, from 1850 to 1859. Now, Sharps himself left the Sharps company in 1855, and the way he got these guns into production is basically he had to bring in investors, he had to bring in capital. He just didn't have it himself, and that put him in a position that he wasn't really that crazy about, where he was actually the chief engineer for the Sharps company, but he was not the CEO. He did receive $1 per rifle as a licensing fee. That was a royalty basically to him. But he left in 1855 and started the C. Sharps Firearms Company, and they made the 4-shot Sharps Derringer, 4 barrels. And that was quite popular, and they made about 100,000 of those. Now, they made about 100,000 of these of all models. They made the slant breech model until 1859, and in 1859, the head armorer, master armorer, who was also the production supervisor for the Sharps Firearms Company, redesigned the rifle, and he designed this straight breech block. And that was a much stronger design. And as proof of the pudding, this gun is one of the few Civil War paper cartridge breech loaders, paper or brass cartridge breech loaders, to successfully make the transition to a commercially successful brass cartridge firing gun. And in fact, the 1874 Sharps was the quintessential buffalo gun, and quite popular, as Matthew Quigley could attest. So that's the origins of this gun. Now, the interesting thing of this is, in addition to the straight breech, Richard Lawrence was also responsible for another Sharps innovation that was very important. So this gun went into the breech-loading trials of 1860, and everybody, both on the government side and certainly on the company side, had very high hopes for it. And in fact, those hopes were dashed. The Sharps simply did not do that well in the trial. It was not found to be that accurate at 300 yards. So Richard Lawrence gave his head a good scratch on that one, and he came up with the answer. And the answer is a little bit surprising. Now, the original Sharps cartridges, all through the slant breech period, were a lot like conventional paper cartridges for muzzleloading guns, in that they were made up with the bullet at one end, the powder behind it, all wrapped up in a paper tube, that then had a tail, and in a conventional muzzleloader, you bite that tail off and pour the powder down the barrel, and then you ram, the cartridge and the bullet down. Right? Sharps being a breech loader, the whole cartridge went into the breech, but the block had a razor edge to it, and when you raised the block, that would cut the back of the paper off. And this is what those cartridges looked like at the time. Here's one I made about 20 years ago for testing another Sharps. So it cut the back of it off, exposing the powder to the flash from the cap, and off you go, right? But what Richard Lawrence figured out is that they were losing too much powder when they cut the tail off of that cartridge. And they could be losing an erratic amount of powder each time. And that was giving them poor accuracy. In fact, they decided they were probably losing 20 grains of powder. That was giving them poor accuracy at extreme range. So Lawrence invented what came to be known as the flat-base Sharps cartridge, which looked like this. It's simple paper tube, once again, with a bullet on one end, but the other end, instead of being twisted, was flat. It was sealed with a cup of paper from the inside that's glued in. And the flash from the cap burns through that paper in the base and sets off the charge. Quite different, quite elegant, really. And no longer any need to cut the tail of the cartridge off, and you always had exactly the same amount of powder going off every time. And they went back into the trials, and they whipped everybody pretty conclusively. Right? So that ended up being the right thing. And the 1859 was a very popular gun during the Civil War. It was used by Berdan's sharpshooters, quite famously. But it was used by other troops as well. And in fact, it was used by the 13th Pennsylvania. And since I live in Pennsylvania, that was one of the reasons why I thought it was appropriate for me to try out a Sharps. Besides the fact that I really like them. It's just neat as a gun. Right? So, anyway, that's the history of the Sharps. Well, as I mentioned before, all of the replica Sharps being made right now have a problem with the breech block leaking gas and causing real bad fouling. And they all have that problem to some degree or another. Now, 20 years ago, I tested an 1863 Sharps sporting rifle. And the 1863 and 1859 are virtually the same gun. The only difference is some barrel markings. A little bit of difference with the way the flash cone for the nipple is set up. But essentially it's the same gun. And that gun was a sporting gun, very beautiful, right? Just lovely. And of course, I shot that with the older style paper cartridges where you cut the back off of the cartridge. But what I found when I shot that gun is right from here, I would shoot it and a sheet of flame would come straight up in front of my face from the breech block, okay, which is not a good thing. And all kinds of soot and fouling came out of that. So by the time I was done shooting this gun, I looked like I'd been working in a coal mine for a week. My face was completely black. My shirt, my hat, everything was completely covered in soot whenever I shot it. I was lucky that I had a gun that did not gum up that fast. I mean, I could easily get 10 or 15 shots out of it before it started getting really hard to operate. But every time I shot it, you would not have wanted to have held a piece of paper above that breech while I was shooting it. It would have just burst into flames. I mean, there was a huge sheet of flames that came out. I never really noticed it myself while I was shooting because it happened so fast. But my son Rob happened to be photographing me then, and he told me about it. And we had it in some of the pictures at the time, though over 20 years I have lost those. But I was testing that gun for an article, and in fact this is the article right here. It was in the spring 2003, I think, edition of Guns of the Old West. And I fully expected I would keep that gun when I got it as a T&E. I thought I would just pay the price and keep it because I was interested in having one. But that fouling problem turned me off so badly that I did not. I sent it back to the company I got it from. And I have not had another percussion Sharps since. But I've been aware that there are some guys who do a modification to take care of that breech problem. And the best of those guys is a fellow named Larry Flees in Michigan. So when I bought this from Dixie, I decided I was not even going to shoot it until Larry worked on it. In fact, I didn't even look at it until Larry worked on it. I got it shipped from Dixie and never even opened the box. I immediately transshipped it to Larry Flees to have him do his work. And what he does is he replaces the floating chamber that Pedersoli uses. And that's one of the things Pedersoli did to try to accommodate sealing the gas better, was to have a floating chamber. But Larry gets rid of that, and he has a press-fitted fixed chamber. He replaces the factory gas plate with a gas plate that he manufactures. And that gas plate has an O-ring. Now, Pedersoli, since I tested that other rifle 20 years ago, Pedersoli has also developed their own O-ring modification to the gun. And it's quite different than Larry's, and to be honest with you, from everybody I've talked to, it does not work completely well, which is why I decided to go with Larry. So he replaces the gas check plate with a new one. He also replaces the vent that communicates the flash into the chamber from the nipple. He replaces that with a stainless steel flash cone that is really much more efficient at directing that fire in there. And he replaces the Pedersoli clean-out screw with a longer, better fitted clean-out screw. And he also replaces the factory nipple with an Ampco nipple. So with all that done, the gun should not have any gas leaks. Now, one thing it won't do is it won't cut the back off of tailed paper cartridges anymore, because Larry's gas check plate does not have the razor edge. And in fact, Larry tells you flat out, don't try to cut the back off of a cartridge because it's just going to jam and cause a gas leak when you fire it. And as soon as you start leaking some gas, the erosion will make you leak more. Right, so Larry will tell you flat out to use the flat base Sharps cartridges or load it with loose ammunition, and not to try to cut the paper cartridges off with the gas check plate. So anyway, that's what I had done with this. I'm going to be straight up. Larry gave me a discount. He also put a longer front sight on it to allow me to file it down so it'll be on at 50 yards, because typically these guns shoot very high at 50 yards with the short factory sight they have, and if you don't put a longer sight on, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you put a longer front sight on and you adjust that down for 50, you can use the ladder rear sight, which is fully adjustable, for anything longer. So you can get it adjusted for 100, 200, 300 yards, no problem, and still shoot 25 and 50 yards without being a foot over your target. So that is a pretty good thing. Okay, so with no more ado, let's take this thing to the range and just function test it and see how it works with the paper cartridges I made. And we're going to fire a few of them and see how it works as a fowls. Well, I'm going to be shooting this gun with these Sharps paper cartridges that I made. So it's a tracing paper skin, flat bottom, also tracing paper, no nitrate. It's loaded with 65 grains of 2FG Swiss, with the remainder made up of cream of wheat as a filler. And then the bullet is an Era's Gone Richmond Laboratories Sharps bullet, 54 caliber bullet, heel based. So I loaded up a bunch of those to try them. It's the right length when the chamber's not fouled, but we'll just shoot a few and see how it goes. They are going to be set off by these Schutzen musket caps, which you can always tell musket cap because they're winged. Right? They call them top hat caps sometimes. But these are made by Schutzen black powder. So we'll see how they work. Caps are getting hard to come by. I was able to get 5,000 of these from Grafs and Sons, so they better be good, because I've got plenty of them. All right, let's go shooting. All right, the moment of truth. Take the 1859 Sharps. I'm going to load it up, see how it does. So I got these cartridges in a cartridge box. I'm going to drop the block. Select a cartridge, load it in, close the block, open up my cap box, pull out a musket cap, a handful of fleece. Alright, so I'm going to put the musket cap on. Alright, we are ready to go. Let's see if it goes off. Now I realize you may have already seen some shots on this through the magic of editing in this video, but this is actually the first shot through this rifle ever. Well, that was a disappointment. Well, wow, that was a little smoky. The cartridges are the right length, but they are not going off unless I pierce the back of them to expose the powder. So I'm using unnitrated paper, and that may be a problem. And that's one of the reasons for doing this test, to see what works and what doesn't. I got the length right, but it looks like I'm going to have to remake them with nitrated paper and see if that does the trick. Because as long as I pierce the back, oops, they're doing quite well. Oops, should have taken that off first. So like I said, I got the length right, because even fouled, they're seating in the right place. but the fire is not penetrating them. There we go. But still fun to shoot. I just got to get those cartridges right. Alrighty. Well, in addition to loading it with paper cartridges like these, you can also load the Sharps with loose ammunition. And the way you do that is, once again, you drop the block, take a bullet, an arrow's gone bullet in this case, you take a dowel and you push it right up into the forcing cone. Okay, so you get it good and pushed up in there. Then, take your powder measure, alright, fill up your powder measure. And also pour that right in the chamber. Oops. Now in this case, I'm putting 85 grains in there. And then you're ready to shoot. So let's go shoot. Okay, load it up with loose ammunition. Put a cap on it and see how that does. Now I've got more powder in here than I had in my cartridges because I really can't put a filler in very effectively. Alright, let's see how it does. Alright, a little more stout, that's for sure. I went home after that disappointing performance with the cartridges failing to ignite and rethought things, hit the books. And of course, the original cartridges for Sharps had a nitrated paper bottom. So I decided to make up a test batch of 5 with nitrated paper and see how I did. Originally, I was making the bottom out of the same material that the body's made out of, which is a tracing paper. It's light, but it's very strong, and it was stopping the flame from getting through. So the only nitrated paper I had were coffee filters. You know, what you put in the basket of your coffee maker and put coffee in. I nitrated those to make some handgun cartridges. Excuse me. So it's a little heavier than I like, but I've made some bases out of that, and we're going to try to do it. So I'm going to shoot them in just a sec. I'm going to have to wipe off my lens again, I think. The dew point today is 72 degrees, and it's heading up towards 90. I mean, we're in an awful heat wave, so my lens is fogging up out here. But I'm going to try to shoot these 5, and if that works out okay, then I'll be a happy boy. So let's see what we got. Okay, well, I'm on the right track, but I'm not all the way there yet. I think I'm going to have to try a thinner paper. Most of them went off. A couple of them took 2 caps to go off, but they all went off. So 3 out of 5 went off with the first cap, and 2 of them took 2 caps to get them off. So I think a thinner paper is going to do it. The thing about these Sharps is the flash channel, the passageway for the flame from the nipple to get to the cartridge, is quite convoluted. I mean, first it goes down into the nipple, right? Then it makes a 90-degree turn immediately at the bottom of the nipple. Then it hits the slanted end of the cleanout screw and makes another 90-degree turn to go through the flash cone and actually get to the cartridge. So it's got to travel about 1.5 inches of travel, making a lot of sharp turns on the way. I used 2 different kinds of caps here. I got CCIs. I had a few left of those, and I'm using the Schutzen caps, which I've got 5,000 of those. And what I'm finding is the CCI caps are hotter, definitely hotter. Unfortunately, they're old and they're not all reliable. I've had several misfires where the CCI caps just didn't go off at all, it just pounded the fulminate into the nipple. So the Schutzen caps are all going off, but they don't seem to be quite as hot a flame getting over there. So I think I'm going to have to nitrate some curling papers and use those. And hopefully that'll put me all the way there. So, after its maiden voyage, what are my impressions of the Pedersoli Sharps 1859 infantry rifle? Well, I'll tell you what, this was one of the most successful designs of the Civil War. But so far, not so much for me. And it's certainly not the rifle's fault. The rifle is beautiful, and I think it's going to run great once I get the cartridges dialed in. Like I said, I think I need to make them a little bit longer. Not much, just a tiny bit. And I need to use some nitrated paper for the end of it. I'm going to try that. And if that works out, then I'll be able to get a load going and get it dialed in. But actually, even though I didn't take you down and show you the target, it's not shooting too bad considering I'm just messing around not knowing if it's going to go off or not. So overall, I'm very happy with it. And there's just something very satisfying about these 19th century guns. I mean, they are so mechanical. You know, they called the 19th century the age of invention. And really it is. It's just something about this whole clockwork mechanism that makes it just fun. Now I gotta say, Larry's breech block worked great. I don't look like a coal miner. I've shot probably 20 shots so far today overall, and the action's still working just fine. I mean, it works. No gumminess at all. So, nothing wrong with the gun. Okay, obviously I didn't have a decent mirror when I recorded this, because I do look a little bit like a coal miner. But you just have to take my word for it that it's nothing like the unmodified Sharps. I'm just not getting that flash of burning powder coming up through the breech block. Nothing like that at all. So, and the lever's still working just fine. And I put 25 rounds through it that day. So, you know, on the whole, Larry's work did great. Like I say, I got to get my ammo dialed in on it, and it's going to be great. So I think you're going to be seeing quite a bit more of this guy in the future. And I hope you like going along with me on my journey while I try to get it dialed in. Now, if you've enjoyed this, you know the deal. Thumbs up helps us with the almighty algorithm, right? Which we gotta work with here on YouTube. If you're not a subscriber and you enjoyed this, well, please subscribe. We've got plenty of great content like this coming up. Got more of this, more flintlock stuff, more cap and ball, just a lot of good stuff. Also, I got more stuff, black powder, writing and pictures and blog entries, on my website, mikebellevue.com. And if you want to support the channel on Patreon, I'll put a link down below. And we appreciate your help, but mostly we just appreciate you coming and enjoying it. And by all means, make comments. If you didn't like it, tell me why. Because I can't make them better if you don't tell me what I'm doing wrong. But if you liked it, I don't mind hearing about that too. So until next week, bye.